All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our third installment of the Rethink Food webinar series. I'm Christina Giusti, and I'm a partner lead within food and beverages here at Google. Earlier this summer, we launched this series as a way to connect you all with actionable insights uncovered by Google. During a time in which each new day is unpredictable and the future is still uncertain, it's clear that planning has never been more challenging. We are hopeful that the insights we share within today's presentation will give your teams what you need to adapt quickly to these ever-changing circumstances. Charles Darwin famously said, "It's not the strongest or the most intelligent who will survive, but those who can best manage change." It's been inspiring to see the resilience and adaptability in the CPG industry thus far, and today we hope to further empower you with even more ways to thrive. In our previous webinars, we outlined the parameters of this new normal we are living in and how to lay the foundation for recovery. Today, we will further explore changing consumer habits and the impact they will have on your business. We have some incredible speakers lined up from LRW and McKinsey. We will also hear from Gail Horwood, Kellogg CMO, on how an industry leader is winning in the new normal. Before I get started, I'd also like to call your attention to the chat feature of this live stream. Feel free to submit any questions you have as we move through the presentation, and if we have time at the end, we will answer them. Otherwise, we can let your account team follow up. And with that, I'd like to introduce our own Sarah Schwartz from our CPG strategy team. Sarah has 12 years of marketing experience in the food and beverage space and will share how her team is exploring industry changes in the time of COVID-19. Following Sarah, we'll hear from Lauren Murphy, Director and Research Scientist at LRW's Materials Pragmatic Brain Science Institute. Lauren is known for developing creative approaches to help understand consumer behavior and why sometimes people say one thing but do another. She has over 10 years of experience in experimental design, data science, and scientific communication. I'll now turn it over to Sarah.
Thanks, Christina, and hi, everyone. I'm really excited to share with you today our new research findings and how they can impact your opportunity to win with consumers today and into the future. So when we started planning our research, we couldn't ignore how much change was taking place in the food and beverage industry. We knew that consumers were changing how they were getting food, like through pickup and delivery, and also what they were eating or drinking. For my family, that meant that in the first 3 months of COVID, we had some sort of creative dessert at the end of every single night, whether it was s'mores or cookies or ice cream sundaes. You probably have your own version of these same things and these same changes. More cooking, more meals to plan for, or even eating with the whole family. Needless to say, there has been a lot of change. And as COVID persists, so do the changes that have been brought on. But what we wanted to understand was just how lasting are those changes? So we developed a research plan to understand just that. What changes will persist? What values will shift? What information are consumers looking for? And this was all to inform the impact of COVID-19 on how brands and consumers interact across the food and beverage industry, and especially how will brand discovery evolve? We look to answer questions that many of you have probably had over the past several months. And we explored over 11 different categories. Specific to CPG, we dove into everything from beverages like soda and bottled water and seltzers to snacks, meals, ingredients, and alcoholic beverages. And today we're just going to give a high-level overview of some of what we found. But if there are trends that you're interested in diving into deeper, let us know, and we're happy to follow up on these implications for your business and your consumers. What we did is we partnered with LRW because of their proprietary habits methodology, which is a really unique and interesting approach on evaluating what behaviors turn into habits. And it's all rooted in behavioral science. At the core, what we found was that most of the behaviors that are changed right now are temporary. For example, the treat yourself mindset many of us experienced over the beginning of the pandemic, and maybe still a little bit today, those aren't likely to stick at such pronounced levels. But that doesn't mean we should ignore those changes or others similarly temporary. We're still navigating through COVID, and we're not sure for how long, so we need to be helpful for consumers in the now. But there are a handful of behaviors that are here to stay. And those behaviors fulfill not only what people need now, but also what they believe will be useful beyond the pandemic. And those are the behaviors that become habits. So I'm going to turn it to Lauren to explain more about her team's approach to studying habits, to the framework we used for our research, and to share some of our key learnings.
Thanks, Sarah. To understand whether new behaviors would persist after the pandemic, we used LRW Materials' habit framework to measure whether new or changed behaviors have the important components needed to form habits, as well as evoke the types of feelings in consumers that will support the growth of strong habits. Habits are formed by pairing a specific behavioral context with consistent cues that trigger or initiate that behavior, and valuable reinforcers that contribute to the frequent repetition of that same behavior. For example, a behavior of interest might be eating indulgent foods, as we've alluded to. The context could be fixing myself a bowl of ice cream on a lazy Sunday. My cue for this behavior might be something along the lines of settling in to watch my favorite Sunday drama. And the reinforcer that I get out of it would be a relaxing end to my weekend before starting the busy week ahead. All of these components together help to set the stage for habit formation. A new habit is even more likely to succeed when it is also paired with a positive consumer outlook, something like the preference for new behavior or positive emotions towards continuing that behavior in the future. When these behavioral features are paired together repeatedly, a long-term habit has the potential to form. As our habits are often frequent and automatic, it can be really challenging for individuals to explicitly connect the dots between the cues and the context and the reinforcers within our own behavior. Instead, our technique asks consumers to report accessible, factual information about behavior, which then on the back end is analyzed by our behavior science team to reveal long and short-term habit potential. When we applied these techniques to the food and beverage behaviors, common themes emerged that are driving changes in current behavior. At the moment, emotional needs, like our needs for safety and comfort, are driving a huge amount of change, much more so than the more practical needs for things like ease and convenience. However, it's obvious that those practical needs are still very important and impacting a huge share of behaviors. Think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. First, we need to feel safe and secure before we can prioritize other semi-less essential motivations. Given the importance of emotion right now, it's no surprise that comfort and security are driving immediate short-term changes to the way we engage with foods and beverages. So long as these threats to our safety continue, consumers will continue to reach for products and options that really help them regain that sense of control. When we evaluate all of the potential habits as to whether or not they're going to stick, it's important to identify whether the cues that initiate the behavior, currently this is the threat to our health that's caused by the pandemic, it's important to identify whether those cues will remain. If not, and the cue disappears, the behaviors will likely fall off due to the lack of a consistent trigger. Right now, consumers are making choices motivated by a need for comfort, and this results in increased preference for indulgent behavior like ordering in and eating different and more indulgent foods. The effects of these changes also carry over into the different types of shopping and food purchases that consumers are making. This is our now. Understanding these needs and these changes will help you succeed in the moment during the pandemic. But there's also trends that we need to understand to make sure that we can appropriately plan for the future. The behaviors that are going to be around longer are those that have utility both during the pandemic, but also really broadly help ease the stresses of our daily lives and allow us to become our best selves. Motivations that are going to persist well after the threat of the pandemic has lifted. Behaviors that make our lives easier, like grocery and restaurant delivery, are likely to stay and reflect an acceleration of stable, non-pandemic trends towards increased reliance on delivery. The renewed focus on health that's resulting from the pandemic and has touched many aspects of our lives has reinforced an existing trend towards self-care through mindful eating. These are the behaviors of the future. So we've talked about the behaviors that are sticking now and those that are going to stick around in the future, but how do CPG brands focus on winning for both? In the new normal, there's 3 key themes that have emerged to help us plan for successes for both today and tomorrow. The first is home as the hub. This impacts the ways and the types of choices that we're making. We're all looking for information to influence what we're cooking, what we're planning, what we're preparing. And currently we're relying on sources that we have at our fingertips, mostly digital sources. Next, shifts towards planned behaviors are impacting more impulsive exploration, discovery, and trial. Because we're not in the aisles, we have fewer opportunities to discover new offerings and tend to be sticking with more planned approaches. Finally, balancing the now and next means that, just like brands, consumers are planning for 2 very different realities. The research that we conducted shows us that home really is the hub for discovery, and people are relying on digital sources much more during the crisis than they were on traditional or offline sources. This limited access to information from outside the home during the pandemic has driven almost half of consumers to do more searching online than they were already doing before. It makes a lot of sense that a lot of people are using Google to do these searches for food and beverage information. But what's especially interesting is that over half of people are going to YouTube for food and bev information as well. This increased dependence on digital connections provides opportunities to reach consumers in different ways than we had before. This increased reliance on digital is also reinforced by the safety and the convenience of new delivery methods. While the initial catalyst for all of the behavioral change during this time is really grounded in the now, with people wanting to avoid leaving home, the behaviors that have the most lasting potential are also the ones that are offering benefits that are beneficial well into the future, such as making things easier on ourselves and on our families. One consequence, though, of this digital reliance, in addition to the fewer opportunities for exploration, means that consumers are more likely to stick to CPG brands that they knew prior to COVID, and that shopping digitally is driving consumers to make a lot more grocery lists. As digital shopping becomes more prevalent, there are 2 major implications. One, the type of shopping that people are doing becomes more intentional and much less exploratory. 2 is that consumers are less exposed to the physical cues that are likely to motivate brand and product trial. Both of these things are allowing for fewer opportunities for CPG brands to drive exploration, impulse, and brand connection. But in order to reconnect, brands need to meet people where they are right now, which is behind the screen, and meet them with content that connects the consumer with the brand. And in order to drive that connection, you really must leverage what matters most to consumers right now. Trust and great taste are having the largest impact on choice, impacting almost half of the consumers that have changed their food and beverage choices during COVID. You can leverage brand trust to nudge people forward, but you also need to remind them of why your brand and product tastes good. And tapping into these more emotional connections is important now and as we move into the future. Right now, people are focused on comfort and indulgence. For example, we've seen a huge increase in chocolate conversations, especially around the context of wanting something comforting and indulgent for ourselves and our kids. But as the pandemic continues to evolve, consumers are focusing more on making healthy choices and being mindful about their overall wellness. Those that are eating healthy are focused on qualities connected with long-term health, like a focus on ingredients and benefits over dieting. Balancing these competing needs also means that consumers are conflicted on how best to take care of themselves. Mental health discussions have made their way into conversations around food, and the desire to feel good will continue throughout the now and next. Allowing consumers to satisfy a range of emotional and health needs will make products and choices more appealing and ensure that they are chosen for the long haul when comfort is less in demand and feeling good is more closely tied to healthy and mindful eating. And now I'd like to toss it back over to Sarah to share some of the insights garnered from Google's search data.
So from survey results to search results, in our data, we're seeing a lot of these alcohol delivery and for information on groceries. And while there were extreme surges at the beginning of the pandemic, levels have begun to normalize. But what you'll see is that there's still interest nearly 3 times higher than 2019 averages. And when we consider how consumers are balancing the now and the next, take a look at the graph on the right, which shows interest in wellness. And even with the dip in March and April, people are again focused on self-care, with levels in line with 2019. So as Lauren mentioned, it's not necessarily related to dieting per se. It's just as people are making more mindful decisions around their food and beverage choices, think of the role that your brand can play. And here are some other ways that your brand can connect. In our research results, we looked at some of the top types of information that consumers were looking for to make their food and beverage brand decisions. And these apply across all CPG categories, although there are some that are more prominent in certain subcategories than others. For example, for non-snack brands, recipes are the #1 thing that people look for. And this is just a sneak peek of the research since we're sharing it today for the first time across the industry. We'll follow up with some of these trends and others that Lauren shared. And another exciting thing is that there's even more to come. We're actually going to be executing another wave of this research in a few months to see how these trends evolve over time in COVID. So stay tuned for updates later this year. And lastly, as I mentioned, let your Google partners know if you're interested in specific findings within your category or relevant categories to your consumers. And with that, I'll pass it back to Christina. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for joining us, Lauren. I must say, I really appreciate your choice in yellow top. Those interests were very interesting. I especially identified with the fact that the connection between food and mental health is more important than ever. I know that for me, I'm often surprised by how much feeding my sourdough starter nightly can sometimes feel like a form of meditation. And with consumers shifting more and more to digital to aid their grocery planning, it's more important than ever to make sure our brands are seamlessly answering their questions. Especially as we are in the midst of back to school, there's a real opportunity to help consumers feel confident and comfortable through relevant content. On that note, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Jeff Jacobs, who is joining us from McKinsey's marketing and sales practice to share some insights on how other companies are adapting for the future given these uncertain times. Dialing in from Chicago, Jeff has over 25 years of global line marketing and sales, brand strategy, digital, innovation, and consulting experience. Jeff is one of McKinsey's CPG marketing leaders and has been spending a lot of time helping companies evolve so they can navigate this new normal. We hope you find ways to incorporate his winning strategies into your own plans. Take it away, Jeff.
Thanks, Christina, and thank you, Sarah and Lauren. Thanks, everyone, for spending a little bit of your morning with us today. Those trends absolutely ring familiar, certainly for me, who has 2 teenage daughters and a full house, very much ring true. Over the last year, I've had an opportunity to personally talk to or work with hundreds of companies, CPG companies, and most of whom, understandably, are asking what's next. Many of you may have seen how McKinsey articulates the stages through this crisis, from addressing the immediate needs to preparing for the return. But today we're going to focus a bit more on this reimagine phase. And this phase is different. It's a different mindset than just, let's return to normal, but it really starts to think about what will the new normal actually look like. And I've got one client who I'm working with who actually calls it rebound, because they're not looking to get to the next normal. They're truly looking to see how they get further ahead coming out of this, not just return. So on this page, what we wanted to do is really share a number of the things that we're seeing companies doing, given the changes and the trends identified earlier. Essentially, we've seen 4 core areas where CPG companies are reimagining their business. First, think about how shopping changed during the pandemic, and Lauren talked about it, the role of online. Essentially, in grocery, we had over 3 years of growth in 3 months. Over 50% of people bought groceries online over some modality, and most of those people say they will continue to use online as part of their repertoire. What that means for companies is they need to tackle their omnichannel experience. It's no longer enough to talk about it. They've got to actually think about how they create a seamless experience between brick and mortar and online. What that also means is it's thinking about everything from the digital shelf, or one of the biggest up and coming challenges right now is how you coordinate brand media spend, shopper spend, and now retail media network spend is actually a huge priority that we see a lot of companies focused on. Regarding channels, we are seeing leading companies reallocate their resources based on new behaviors. That means rethinking the role of C-store. Is it for immediate consumption, or is it now potentially for stock up? It means rethinking merchandising. If people are going into stores with lists and very deliberate, how do you actually think about maybe front of store merchandising? What products do you put in front of store? And lastly, it also means evolving the channel team operating model to provide the right pack to the right channels much more quickly. Think about how fast companies had to adapt to multi-packs. They need to be able to think about what companies are trying to do is really think about the entire operating model when it comes to channels. The second area, we see a need to double down on the whole price value relationship companies have. Everyone talks about the recessionary behaviors, but it's not just from a cost perspective. It's been driven by 2 things. One is has been a return to big brands. More consumers are flocking back to the larger, more well-known brands that they've trusted. Second, it means a huge influx of new consumers, many of whom these larger brands had lost over the years. And so what are we doing? We're seeing companies reevaluate their purpose and even the creative strategies, not just to deliver timeless stories, but also timely content that is culturally relevant. They're changing their creative in order to really appeal to these new users and really demonstrate the value that these larger brands provide. Third, there's no question that 2020 made many brands think differently about their communication plans. We saw the collapse of TV inventory, but of course, an explosion of online content. Seeing leading brands evolve their communication strategies, they're focused on a few things. Number one, take a digital-first attitude. Be in the channels where consumers are spending time. Shift money from the upfronts. It might be controversial, but there's a lot of companies that are saying if they were 80% in the upfront, they may go down to 50% because they want flexibility. Another thing that we're seeing is adapting a continuous planning cycle that enables companies to act on breaking opportunities. No longer do they want to actually get everything fixed and upfront. Lastly, each brand has had to rethink how they balance national, broad reach plans with finding pockets of growth. We've seen that there's no longer just one big national plan or national growth opportunity. What that means is companies need to really evolve their operating model so that they can do this at scale. That means investing in digital and analytics to make greater use of audience data, adopting agile scrum teams against key use cases. In one example, we helped a company set up an agile team to personalize messages and creative to new users it had gotten during the summer. Through these agile sprints, the company improved the ROAS by over 12%. They need to change how they measure, removing the barrier between performance marketing and brand marketing. In our view, all marketing is performance driven. So with that, what we wanted to do is spend a couple minutes just bringing a few of these to life. The first one in this chart, our client took a hard look at the volume, the profitability, the packs and SKUs within each of their categories, the cross-category CPG player, and across channels. And if you look at the purple category, it's been one of the biggest growth drivers across channels, especially in C-store. However, during COVID, its performance relative to others and channels changed dramatically. It led them to reevaluate the resources they were putting against each of the channels, as well as which categories within which channels. And what they've also done is started to reassess how they actually do the planning and essentially making that much more continuous. So they look at each channel, they look at each brand, the packs as well, and then the resources. In this next one, this is a page that some of you may have seen, and there's been a lot of discussion around the growth from the larger brands. What we've seen, and we found this one fascinating. What we've actually seen recently, if you look on the left, it is the amount of sales driven from what we would call larger brands. And then if you move to the right, you start to see the amount of growth driven, the exponential growth driven by smaller brands across many of our categories in our industries. And even the rate of growth has been higher. But the further to the right you go, even as you look at 2018, 2019, and then this was a snapshot in April, you saw over 50% of the growth being driven once again by the larger brands. And we know some of this is COVID related, but what we also know is that a lot of the larger brands are almost reimagining or getting much closer to the consumer, really understanding what drives the sentiment, something, quite frankly, that the smaller brands have done. What this opportunity means is for some of these companies, they're getting 20, 30, 40 million new users. In the reimagine, I've actually heard some companies talk about these people, they just tried us because of availability, they'll go back. And the question is, do you accept that? What we see a lot of companies doing is they're not accepting that they're going to go back to their old brands, but they're going to develop the programs to really pull them in, deeply understanding what makes these consumers tick, bringing to life their purpose and authenticity. Again, something that the smaller brands have traditionally done very well. Now, it's one thing to just say that, but the reality is making these changes, you need to change the way you actually operate. And what we've seen with reimagination is a number of companies actually rethinking how marketing is done. Some of the key hallmarks include developing a richer insights engine, not just doing backward-looking research like A&Us, but starting to use behavioral data, building predictive and prescriptive analytics to help anticipate what needs will be, to help really deliver on consumer motivations. They're using data and analytics to build rich audience profiles. They're personalizing messages in creative and dynamically delivering that. And they're able to do that at scale. Within that, they're testing, they're learning, and continuing to scale. Again, something I've been working in CPG for 27 years, and it's not the way it was 20 plus years ago. Right now, CPG marketing is finally bringing in agile marketing and getting results. What that also means is it's enhancing the skills and capabilities amongst all of the marketing team, not just the digital team. Leveraging more agile ways, thinking about new tech partners and how you integrate across your ecosystem. And another important thing is it's this idea of being a data maker, not just a data taker. And when we do that, this is just an example of a business that I was working with. When we see them evolving their model, better using data and analytics, we see the impact. So this is an example. Some of this was before COVID, but some of it was afterwards. And the keys here, when you look at some of the results, some of the keys were they had agile teams set up against key business cases that they wanted to drive. They had test and learn throughout. In many cases, they drove double-digit increases relative to business as usual, improvements in household penetration and return on advertising spend. But they also recognized that not all tests worked, but every single time there was a mechanism in place to learn and evolve, and very much a key tenet of what this reimagine phase will look like. So with that, just in summary, as you assess the behavioral shifts that you think will be sustained within your category, we wanted to leave you with these key areas to think about as you navigate the next normal. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those insights, Jeff. You definitely gave us a lot to think about in terms of how to win in this new normal. And I know from a personal standpoint, I'm definitely taking a digital first approach with all of the online shopping carts I have open in my Chrome tabs right now, which I should probably close. Next, we will hear from Gail Horwood, Chief Marketing Officer of Kellogg's North America, for a fireside chat reviewing not only how COVID has changed her role and the organization, but also Kellogg's approach to audience and video. I'll now hand things over to my colleague, Ann Lund, to lead the discussion with Gail and teach us about Kellogg's story. Ann?
Thank you, Christina, and former Kellogg's buddy. Gail, welcome. We are so excited to have you here, and I know everyone's eager to learn from you and hear your perspective on how Kellogg's is doing in this new normal.
Thanks, Ann. Glad to be here.
Oh, thank you. Well, so let's get to it then. You have had quite an amazing career dealing with marketing transformation across the industry, but we're going to focus on these last 2 years as Chief Marketing Officer of Kellogg North America, where you are responsible for brands that people know and love, one of which I plan to crack into right after this meeting, a little mindful, indulgent snacking, right? And a lot of these brands like Pop-Tarts, like Special K, Eggo, have seen significant momentum due to the current environment. So can you tell us a little bit about how your role as CMO, as well as your marketing organization, has changed?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really exciting time to be in food and in grocery. And as a foodie and a home cook myself, it's really energizing. So first and foremost, it's just exciting to be in this space and to be with brands that are growing and are beloved and that people have incorporated into their new normal. For me, one of the biggest changes, obviously, is this virtual workforce and really reimagining everything we're doing. I think Jeff touched upon it. There's no optionality now. You have no choice but to do things differently, to be agile, to reimagine the way you work. When creative production gets shut down or did get shut down for a period of time, you really have to pivot very quickly. So it's been exciting to watch the team really evolve very quickly and very agilely, and really sort of take in some of these digital behaviors of kind of group scrum type work, etc. For us at Kellogg, we've been focused on a couple of things. Jeff also touched upon that example of going to market as a portfolio, which we've done a little bit of in the past, but we see the benefit of really unifying our message, particularly at retail when people are engaging in new retail behaviors. A great example of that is our Feeding Reading program, a back to school program, which we have run in the past, but for the first time we supported across every media touch point, including television. We were very clear to play up the benefit to consumers, which is buy a box, get a book, in an environment where school is disrupted, library time is disrupted, people may not be able to afford books at all. It's a really incredible benefit to consumers, and we're seeing incredible redemption of this amazing offer. Another thing we're really focused on is this omni-channel acceleration. It's something I've been passionate about as a digital native for a very long time, but we're really seeing things pick up and a focus on retail media networks inclusive of that.
I mean, these are all things that are definitely disruptive as well to the ways that we've been doing business. So how have your partnerships changed in the last 8 months?
Partnerships in terms of like how we constructed them, it used to be kind of an annual planning process. And the one thing I would say is we're in contact with our partners much more frequently. Mm-hmm. A lot of the partnerships that we've done historically in media around sports sponsorship, do you know whether a bowl game is going to happen or not, or a sporting event a real live event is going to happen or not? Mm-hmm. We're doing a lot more scenario planning. We're asking for and expecting a lot more flexibility in our partnerships, mm-hmm. not only in terms of assets that we can take advantage of, but the way we can engage with the audiences these partnerships bring. So we've had to get very creative very quickly. If a movie premiere gets delayed, if a gaming title is launched, moves from Christmas time to spring. So we've become very agile and come up with a lot of scenarios, and we're speaking to our partners much more. And what's great is everybody's working together here. There's a real collective mentality about how do we super serve our consumers and get these experiences right. And there's no roadmap. So it's been fun to kind of test and learn new things.
Well, speaking of changing in partnerships, I just had to text my husband dog during this.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, we're all used to these discussions.
It's a new world. But I think what you were saying about just the refocus of your partnerships, it's great to have audiences as kind of our unifier, as our guidepost for everything. And that makes all of our jobs and working together easier. So, and you actually, when we were preparing for this, said to me, it's all about audiences, Anne. And I loved hearing that. Can you, though, unpack that a little bit and explain what that means for your brands?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's about leveraging all the data and relationships we have to truly understand emerging audience behavior in real time. So Google, you've been an incredible partner in terms of some of the search data we just saw. We're seeing some of those same behaviors play out very specifically for our brands and for our business. The pieces that Sarah shared, but we're taking advantage of some of the unique assets. And I said with our partnerships, we're looking for unique differentiators like your audience lab, where our Ego brand is working to truly understand how we can bring our first party data together with your audience insights to really craft creative that's highly differentiated. We want to make sure that we're culturally relevant in this era of incredible disruption in terms of what's happening in our world. And so, we're taking advantage of your Culture Academy to really educate our marketers, but also make sure that what we're putting in the marketplace reflects the values and the messaging our consumers want to hear, because we don't want to be out of sync with our consumers.
For sure. And it's a business strategy that has diversity, equity, and inclusion at its core. So on that note, I'd be remiss to not ask, what is Kellogg's doing in the area of DE&I?
Yeah, I mean, this is an area of personal. I deeply believe in ensuring that we stand in solidarity with our colleagues, our Black colleagues, but our, not only our employees, but our partners and our vendors. And what's been exciting for me is that at Kellogg, our internal talk track really matches our external actions. I think it can be challenging for big brands to always be outwardly demonstrative of their values. And historically, we've seen companies who have good intentions not necessarily play those out in public. I mean, we've made a lot of internal commitments in terms of how we're going to do business, but we've also discussed those and taken action publicly We did announce a $1 million contribution earlier this year, part of a longstanding 20-year commitment to the NAACP. This is not something we've just done. We've had a longstanding relationship with this organization. Publicly in marketing, I've taken the AIM pledge, and we're working to ensure that our agency partners and our vendor partners reflect the diversity of our consumers, and that our messaging is really in sync with the cultural reality we're all living in. And so there's a lot of work underway in this area, and it's something that, as I said, is something I'm personally driving, but obviously it couldn't happen without everybody in the organization, from our procurement team to our marketers, et cetera, to our most senior leaders, supportive. So it's been rewarding.
For sure. And we've enjoyed partnering with you on things and look forward to more of that in the future. So switching gears just a little bit, the video marketplace has changed drastically. You have at Kellogg's, prior to COVID, been leading a video agnostic strategy, right? But given the supply issues, given the surge in streaming and the time spent in mobile, all the great stats that we saw in the beginning of the presentation, how have you pivoted or accelerated that strategy in the last 8 months?
Sure. I mean, we've definitely accelerated our video agnostic strategy, and our investment in streaming has increased exponentially. What I would say is, and what's been important, sort of harkens back to an earlier comment I made, is about really being on tap in real time to watch these behaviors unfold. I mean, I think media strategy used to be kind of an annual planning type exercise. And yes, you would make optimizations in your plan every quarter or whatever, and you'd make channel level optimizations. But I can't tell you we're having weekly discussions watching the changing landscape. The upfront has become a bit of a soap opera. So we're all kind of watching day by day with what's going on to make sure that we're accurately buying and accelerating our media where our consumers are. So, we're evolving our JBPs. As I said, we're talking to you and other JBP partners more frequently, increasing investments in these areas, and really looking and making sure that our media mix is, again, culturally relevant, that we're, representing diverse audiences and programming. So it's become a weekly conversation now.
Well, I know we enjoyed talking about it before too. I think it's a time where, content, art, all of those things are not really anything without their audience, right? And so when we go back to that theme here, it makes the conversation that much more impactful. But switching gears, because it's not just about art, it's also about science. We have to talk about measurement. I know measurement is so important to you guys, third-party measurement in your business, but I have to imagine that maybe the ideology around measurement has changed a little bit. Is that true for you guys? And how are you thinking about it?
I mean, for me, it's a super exciting time to imagine that our traditional measurement models have been completely disrupted, right? So we can't, yes, we're measuring, of course, in the same way we always have, but we always have to consider what's happened in the landscape and how plans have stopped and started and volumes have stopped and started, et cetera. So, we just have to get a lot more comfortable with experimentation and unmeasured tactics. Right. And so we're spending a lot of time sort of strategy. That doesn't mean we don't want accountability, of course. Yeah. We need accountability, but we're thinking about how to leverage our retail relationships and some of the retail media networks to help really help us understand what's working and what's not. I love some of the things, that's happening in Walmart, and we've taken advantage of some of their unique opportunities, like they launched Walmart Drive-In. So marrying this idea that consumers can no longer, in many parts of the company, go directly to movies with their family, but they can go to drive-ins. We became a sponsor of that experience, and we're able to measure that in 161 different stores and in their parking lots. We're able to measure that right down to sales. So we do really care, obviously, about measurement, but what we're having to do is really adapt. We have no option but to adapt to new tactics, unmeasured channels, and doing a lot of experimentation. So for me, that's a very exciting time working with the teams to really think that through.
For sure. I think there could be a lot of innovation down the line across the industry here. So that's great to hear. So so we've reached kind of the end of our chat, but wanted to end on a fun question. But we joked about how we didn't really want to do a fun question, which in itself was kind of funny. But it actually led to a great conversation about the dynamics of this modern workforce that we live in, and how it can be hard to connect. It can be taxing from a time perspective. It can be draining of energy. Your dog can be barking in the middle of an important call, right?
Dog lovers here.
Exactly. Is there anything that's resonated with you in these past few months that you'd love to share?
I recently learned I have a lot of time to consume content now, like the rest of us. I'm very, very busy, but I'm also not doing anything else but staying at home. So I have lots of time. And one of the things I learned about actually was something our Kellogg company brought to us. There's this concept of CQ, connectional intelligence. And there's a woman named Erica Dewan who came and spoke to us, and her talk really resonated with me because it was about understanding how to leverage virtual communication, text, Zoom calls, stream calls, to really understand what's expected of connecting with people. And what it meant to me personally, it resonated so much. I not only participated in her presentation, but I watched it again and I shared it with my team because it's a lot about helping people understand how to use different mediums in the right way. So we've all seen that meme, that meeting could have been a text. But the converse is, we're all getting texted morning, noon, and night because we can be. So she goes to the level of helping us understand and really think about how we're using text versus email versus Zoom versus FaceTime. I find I FaceTime now with some of my teammates. But after participating in this connectional intelligence kind of workshop, I realized, that's probably not a great idea to do like at dinner time, because most people are at dinner time just because I'm free. So just really thinking about it. But she has sort of 4, what I would describe like underpinning values. It's about valuing your teams visibly and people you work with, communicating clearly. These are all things we can get behind, but just being really precise in your language. When you text something, it can be really misunderstood if you're not careful. Collaborating confidently. And the most important one for me is just trusting people totally. I mean, we've had to trust that people working from home, juggling zillions of different priorities, are able to drive the business. And we've seen great success of that with that at Kellogg. And I've been really proud of how we've executed, how we've changed gears nimbly. And so this idea of connectional intelligence has really emerged for me. It's you've got IQ, you've got EQ, and now you have CQ.
Love it. It resonated with me, a lot of those points, and I'm constantly looking for ways to kind of better myself from this new environment. So thank you for sharing. We do have a little time. There was a question. I'm wondering if you're okay if we
Sure.
throw that out there. Someone said, Christina, do you want to read the question?
Hey guys, sure. Yeah, happy to moderate. And don't worry, I also texted your husband about the dog barking. Just kidding. But it's all good. While you were doing that, there was literally a car beeping nonstop for about 10 seconds in my alleyway. So never a dull moment on these things. Great to see you, Gail. We did have a question from the audience, which is, how do you balance the brevity of these times with connecting with consumers that doesn't feel like we are trying to make our products more important than they realistically are to our consumers?
That's a great question, and it's one that I recently took or took a few months back in one of our town halls, because we as a company have a set of values that we want to serve our consumers. We don't want to be seen as selling things to our consumers in a time when they're worried about where their next meal is coming from. So you have to be really careful about your language, about the context, about what you're doing in this time. So it's really about demonstrating consumer empathy and truly understanding consumer need at the moment. So we have invested, as we've used data in the past, in more cultural understanding, and we're spending a lot more time in real time, truly kind of living the lives of our consumers and really thinking about, does it make sense for us to be running media messages during certain things that are happening in the external environment? what are we saying specifically? So what I would say is really spend the time to be rooted in your consumer's reality. We understand we all have business pressures and we have P&Ls to manage, sales to gain. But for us, it's about ensuring that we're delivering the right message in the right context. In this case, it could be a recipe. It could be a very different message than historically we've driven in the past. It might not be, an urgency to run out and buy it, but it's about how to use the product and get the most value out of it with your family. It might be a community, an event with your grandmother or your grandparents or something like that.
That's great.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we are open if there's any other questions. Otherwise, Gail, any parting thoughts from you on just this as we go into the new normal here?
Well, I've been a long time, believer in the value of search data, and I think even more so today, and getting those real-time insights. What I, have found very valuable is the custom work you've done for us, because I truly do believe it's very specific to your business. There are generalities, obviously, but really understanding the business objectives, the realities, and your unique consumer constituents. But I have really valued your, your search data always, but even now more than ever. And then, marrying that with some of the unique advertising opportunities you present, but ensuring that that has omni-channel reach, and really thinking about that entire kind of, from idea to sale and back again, and ensuring that everything works together.
And we're excited to work with you on a few projects in that realm from going end to end. So thank you so much for your time today. We are thrilled to have you here, and we look forward to more work together again. Christina,
thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, and Christina, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Gail and Anne. It's great to hear about all the ways that Kellogg's is able to adapt in these uncertain times. And with that, our third webinar comes to a close. Many thank yous to all of our amazing speakers, but most importantly, thank you for joining us today. We certainly hope you found the session valuable, but in case you did miss anything, we'll be following up shortly with a recording and key takeaways. As we all look for ways to win in the new normal, while people are making more of their decisions at home and looking for entertainment via streaming content, we're pleased to announce we'll be hosting another webinar in mid-October featuring some amazing YouTube stars and the ways you can leverage their star power to reach coveted audiences. While we can't share names just yet, we promise this is an event you won't want to miss. More to come soon. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for joining.